I'm Daniel. Work up with the North Puget Sound weed crew. This is kind of our how we get into drones and then kind of what we're treating. So our big invader right now that we're dealing with is the non-native cattail, and that's ended up hybridizing with the native cattail. We've had issues with not really seeing any of the native cattail anymore. And so we kind of started a project and to go on to what a tribal partner was doing. Had gone and mowed down a 3-acre section. We moved into what do you want to say? Kind of industrializing, and you started using our March Masters with a mower to replicate. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. It's narrow leaf cattail. Again, has this lot bigger gap in between the male female, where a lot of your native is going to be about touching, as well as the size of the leaf is essentially about the width of a pencil. So that's one way to tell, at least with the narrow leaf. The hybrid does have multiple different phenotypes, so that one's a little bit harder. But also it goes and grows so tall that it wasn't having any open water. Again, we're opening this up for hopefully fish, waterfowl, shorebird. None of that is going to go and land or be able to really swim much through a lot of this. So this is kind of what we were dealing with, a big monoculture. And it was just straight fields, very dense, clustered, and no open water. And so we got in there and started mowing early, and we kind of started doing that. That kind of turned into almost mowing your lawn. By the end of the season, we ended up having some regrowth. After a while, we'd go back and try to spray some of the regrowth, but again, it wasn't working quite as well as we thought. It did stop seed arrest, stop it from flowering, so that was good. But after that, it was kind of mowing your lawn. So we ended up going out and noticing how much we actually had to deal with. And so we had a crew go out for almost 3 weeks. We started at the top and essentially took a boat and had people using field maps pretty much on maybe 1 to 5 second timing, taking points. And they just go out, find a patch of cattail that was at least 50% cattail, if not 100%. And they just walk around that patch. And so we could go through and actually see how much we are dealing with in a delta. This here is on the Skagit, South Delta, and roughly about with 2,100 acres vegetated, we were dealing with about 800 that was at least 50% cattail. So in that last photo, you saw kind of the braided channels and everywhere. And so with these machines getting access to and from, kind of like even John was talking about, you can't just walk into these or drive up to them. We were having to tow these Marsh Masters for upwards of 3-4 miles into some of these sites, as well as every time a flood happened, like this bank, we used to be able to easily crawl up. A flood happens, erodes the bank, so we had to kind of nose up to it, tie up to a tree, and essentially yard ourselves up onto the bank. We're also running into, again, having seasonal staff, and as well as site changes. This ended up being used to be an old egg ditch that's had been a mat of cattail, which we previously for a couple years been able to drive right over, no problem. And after that root mass started to disappear, we sank that thing in pretty good and got that stuck, which made it an issue when we start getting into some high tide. situations, but luckily it didn't quite start going into the tub. It actually floated itself out somewhat, and then we were able to use another machine to get it out of there. Also, we ended up getting up in here, you get rid of all the cattail. It was next to a channel, and some of these channels get a little bit bigger where you could cross. We had the grasses that were kind of up over the edge of that, and it was too late when we actually saw where the channel was. But to that point, when we do have these issues, that comes into actually having to fix them. And the time it takes of getting out of the field, this repair again is getting that thing stuck sideways in the ditch. Takes 2 weeks to fix. We had airboat issues and valves. And then we have people that would try to go over logs, little ditches kind of the wrong way, and it throws a track. So you lose another whole day of work. One thing we did find too, when you're driving through the cattail, you don't realize how much wood debris is in a lot of these areas. Um, shows one where we had done a drone spray the year prior, and you can see all that woody debris up in there. It ended up being essentially just my analogy is you take a box of toothpicks and you kind of throw it out on the landscape, which the Marsh Master does not like going over all that woody debris, as well as it is not a fun ride. So here we ended up having a contractor out of Richland come out and survey for us. And so they ended up going and taking the little Mavic and spending about 2 days to essentially map about 2,500 acres. They had their little generator and computer. They'd fly. They'd come down, pull an SD card. This guy throw it in the computer, and they were charging batteries as they go. That drone only flied for about half hour at a time. So we got them out there with the boat, and they went to work. After they got everything mapped, we were able to go and mark out all these little circles that were cattail big sections, and then had to work with them on how far they can actually fly their big spray drone and what they were comfortable with to where we were trying to get pretty much all this stuff done in the matter of a day or two. Um, so we had to go and make sure we could set up water in all these different locations, have clean water for them because their nozzles on those things, you can't be taking anything out of the river with the sediment. Um, and then, yeah, essentially sending that to them, making sure they're comfortable with those. And then from there, we started working with the logistics of how many boats we need. Also, we were having to have the trailer, which you'll see in a second, up here at the parking lot. And so we were having to shuttle batteries and chem and everything else out from there. There is some things with this when they did the mapping, and since it is kind of a knotweed group, we did find some areas that I don't know we didn't really expect or plan on. It was kind of a secondary or tertiary find, but we did find all these big patches, which again having this aerial imagery is great just so you can have know where that is. And if crew finishes up early somewhere, they're out doing something else and going by, you can just say, hey, can you hit these couple spots? And they can go easily see them on the map. And, or you can just send them a screenshot of kind of where it is and they can look in their field maps. Couple more things that we did find with that aerial imagery. is again going through. This was a bunch of styrofoam and blue barrels we're thinking was part of a dock. We'd gone through and sprayed right next to it, but with the logs here, we'd kind of run into it and we'd go around the whole section with the boom spray. And so we didn't actually see what that was until we got this imagery. And then we also have found a couple hot tubs out there. So we used a WCC crew that went and chopped up the foam and the barrels and then carried it out into the airboat. And then they went and chopped up a couple of these hot tubs and carried them out. So this drone contractor came in with his big trailer generator. He was loaded up pretty good. And then this is pretty much again where we'd go and be bringing all the batteries to right at the boat launch. And once there's his table of batteries was done, the boat people on the boat take them back out to the drones. We were constantly going through them. They were flying two of them at once. So by the time the shuttle person got back out into the field, that they were loading up and taking off again. One of the big things too is also making sure we have a big enough landing, and so that was another thing that we've learned is these things do like to land on their own once they start getting into low battery and have turned them into a weed eater. So make a little bit bigger landing than you think you need. So again, they went through, mapped 2,700 acres. We ended up treating a bunch of cattail and some canary grass over a couple days. And I went through and just from where we were able to get the time saving if we tried to use a Marsh Master, and that is again if we could actually get in there, um, that would save us about 4 to 6 weeks of work. And so right there is a big cost savings. Um, One thing, if you do work with the contractors, talk to your GIS department and also have an idea of what you're looking for in the metadata. And I guess these guys are usually in the ag world, and so the farmers aren't really looking for anything more than okay, where you hit, where you didn't. When we were asking for some specifics and to, I guess, go back and get some of that. Just make sure they're kind of set up for that, and that you know what you need. So going back post treatment, there were areas that we didn't want them to hit. So this is essentially what it looked like afterwards. You can kind of see some of the green patches and then the lines, which I thought they did pretty good of keeping some of this at a very straight line. I thought there was going to be more drift, but it is almost a perfect 90-degree angle in some of these spots. And then you get into some of these areas up here that were spirea and some other willow patches that we wanted to save. And in here, there was a bunch of small fruited, small fruited bulrush. And so that was a nice solid patch. So they were able to go around almost all those patches. So we ended up getting our own. We ended up getting the Agris T40, 110-pound payload. Again, you gotta, we're learning too on that is the max, but you can't use that all the time. And we did talk to the contractor, and if you do have some of the features, like say a train follow or something, and all of a sudden you go over a ditch or say a channel or something, and then ties out, it's going to drop down to stay at the perfect height. And then if you have it full, as it's having to put a bunch of energy into the motors to kind of stop it after it starts dropping. They've blown a couple motors. So again, even though that's the max, they said maybe halfway. don't go really over 3/4 of what that's supposed to be, and to kind of save your motors. And then we use the Mavic again on the mapping side of things. And that one average 25, it can go up to 45 if it's depending how you're having the settings and how fast it's going. But yeah, going using that one, be able to see where we've treated and what we need to do, and then be able to use the big one to actually go in and get stuff done. For us, navigating the FFA or not FFA, FAA was a bit of an issue. We tried to do it on our own, and that was not as easy as we kind of thought it was going to be. Their system is not set up yet for drones. Um, with the small ones, it's a relatively easy registration. You go online, turn your stuff in, and you can print something out really quick. But the big one, because it is over the 50-pound limit, it you have to do that paper and snail mail and get a bunch of other exemptions. And so um, essentially it's treated like you're registering a Cessna. It gets its own N numbers. So that slowed things down. And at some point, we ended up deciding just to go and use a contractor that helped us get through a lot of this stuff. That's again what they do, and they'll know how to navigate and what exemptions you need, what ones you don't. Um, some of the ones were like if you were spraying from a plane, which is still aerial application, but it's unmanned, so it doesn't count. And having some of those actually go through is a lot harder.
We're doing a good job of distracting. Yeah. So you can, when they jump. I got the Knotweed Summit on. We can watch that.
Can Clallam mute your mic?
Can have something to like put your hands on, it's easier. So there's two people, and normally they're tall, and the person who's the flyer is really short, and you go on either side of them.
Can everyone mute their mics? There, thank you. Also, once we got through that, there is a training program and operations manual that you have to come up with before you get approved for your COA. And so again, the contractor had a lot of that stuff from helping other commercial programs. Some of it, again, you can get and modify for what you need as long as there's some kind of paper trail on what you're doing. You do need a third class medical, and there is a monthly logging that you need to do of how much you're flying the big drone. So again, there's also a lot of other things in there of their time when you are even just logging. It's not very clear of, it talks about hours, and it's pilot and control hours, but is that, again, is it flight time? Is it time just setting up everything? They categorize things differently, and you actually have to track, say, your whole setup and ground help versus actual flight hours. And then comes with the program of actually learning how to set it up. This is using the DJI program, Terra. So again, we think it should be able to go in, you have your square of where you have stuff and just say, okay, generate a route. You can put in your width, how high above, your angles, and think it should do that. Well, we found that we had a lot of this errors coming out of failed to generate your route, but it doesn't really give you a tip of what needs to get fixed. And so that was a big kind of issue in learning the program, and ended up being, we had upgraded versions of the software and actually had to revert back to about 3 or 4 versions prior to get that away and let us actually make routes. Part of it that we're thinking is we have the water features in the channels, but also all these red dots are driftwood, and it essentially thinks that's a 20-foot pole that it's going to run into, even though it's only what 3, 5 feet off the ground. Um, and so it acts like it's going to run into it, and so it if there's too many there, it won't generate a route. But again, this is kind of what we did with the other one is you can make other sections if there's known natives. And so you're not, again, spraying everything. And then it'll generate its route around all those markers. Here's one of the ones that kind of flying. But we did find, especially on this day, we had a good breeze and just enough for the tops of the cattails to be going back and forth. And its ground sensor or radar kept picking that up as it was getting too close to the ground or an obstacle with being with it moving. So again, learning kind of those things of once you get after a couple mile an hour wind and the tops of the tree or cattail was moving that, or even if it's grasses, that you have to turn off the down sensor. The only issue that we also came up with is say we had it set and it starts right at the edge and it's over some of this native grass and then it's flying over the cattail. It's when it first starts is when it sets its ground height using its radar. So if you want it 10 feet above the crop, it's going to go 10 feet above the grass. And so as soon as it goes and flies over the cattail and it does tip forward a little bit, we started taking off some of the tops of the cattail with the propeller. So we had to do kind of some emergency stops and try to get that figured out and have it start actually over the cattail and not in some of these other lower sections. Here's some of the flight lines from some of those areas that we did do. Again, this is a lot of our, say, planned little routes that we are trying some different herbicide on. And then we did some manual to hit some other patches since we had some other chem. And then this is nice because it actually shows when it's spraying where it's green versus the white is just the travel lines. But when you go to export that and a lot of stuff on our internal weed mapping and stuff, um, you get all these red lines. They don't have it to where when you export, it shows when the sprayer is on or off. So when you go give this to your GIS person and they kind of look at you not very happy when you thought you were going to get something that they could just go and um, clip out the flight lines. But if you do anything that's manual and isn't blocked out, that essentially you can't really tell anymore. So again, things to consider when using the drones. They do kind of overpromise of kind of how much they can do. It's good marketing, and kind of I don't want to say we got caught in some of that, but also we tried to go on a little bit bigger side just because of that. But um, it wasn't really understood on some of that too. Of well, that is essentially the best scenarios possible and not having a lot of travel between spraying. Because again, we're talking about a 5, 6 minute battery life, and these batteries are about 3 grand a piece. So if you're having to have a big stack pile of batteries because you can't charge them right away, again, we're not out right next to a road, and so that kind of changes how much our productivity goes. Um, and that big map that they did for us, um, again, the GIS department was not very happy that we wanted to host that layer um, on field maps just because of the cost to get that up there. But it was essentially they're like, we'll do this once, but you got pretty much won't be able to do this very often. And if you're going around and taking a lot of the photos and things of post treatment, during treatment, and not just one big thing is the storage, the data storage, and not just the data storage, but the processing of it and what you do with it and the amount of space it actually takes and time. Um, we had to get a whole nother computer just to run a lot of the programs because once it starts going, if you mess with it and like you pretty much ruin where you were. And so there's some times that we're processing stuff for upwards of 18 to 36 hours, depending on the size of the maps, the orthos that are being done. So, again, just kind of knowing what you're dealing with and again, the size that you're messing with. Um, one of those big things you saw in the original map is just the logistics of accessing areas. And that's going to again determine on the amount of batteries you're going to have to look at getting. With the contractor we initially used, um, we kind of went through what I think he had about 30 batteries, and we were able to keep up with that with the two drones. We used 8 this last year, and that was not near enough with one using one drone, and just to get be able to keep going while the batteries were getting charged. And again, making sure you kind of know what you're getting and getting the fast charge availability. The 240 volt, like you can charge a battery if you got the juice in roughly 15 minutes. If you try to just plug that into your standard 120-volt outlet, you're upwards of 35 to 40 minutes waiting for a single battery to charge. So get more chargers and make sure that either the generator you have is big enough that it can handle that fast charging load. The one thing too that did kind of scare us a little bit is the less than 5 acre or gallon an acre kind of spray volumes. But we did end up going with pretty much the lowest amount that we could on, especially like our Mazapir, which is what somewhere about 3 gallons. Um, and it did have pretty good results. And so at least we had something to go with. Also, some of the new things that are going on is we talked to, say, like DOT. They'd been using a chem that with aerial application. The label changed, and their dealer and them didn't really realize it. And then they went and looked right before they actually sprayed, and they had part of a road shut down, and then realized, oh, nope, this doesn't work anymore. And so them and the contractor were pretty upset. Also, this last December, there was a conditional security assessment done, and that's not letting a lot of the foreign made drones now use the FCC frequencies that are needed, and so it's essentially grounding a lot of the new drones. But if there are some of those ones that were registered before that date, those are still good to go. So again, another thing you're thinking about if you're getting the new ones, but I know with especially with the spray drones, um, it's a lot harder to get some good I don't know US ones. The It's a newer thing, and so the technology the drones themselves are good, but the programming and software to go along with the drones, we've been hearing is not quite as set up and cohesive as the GGIs. So at least we kind of got under that for now. After that, that's about all I got.